This is the safety portion that we are mandated to do by the state. And so we're going to be talking about the third quarter stuff that's upcoming. We're going to do a policy review. We're also going to be discussing review of the second quarter, some of the safety stuff that we've had and some of the accidents that have occurred. So we'll go ahead and get started. As we know, we're in full force of the wildfire season. So that's going to be kind of our topic this time is incident rehabilitation on incident management scenes. But let's talk about the last quarter. So on second quarter, we had a couple of injury reports. One of them was a laceration or an avulsion to the finger. A member was unloading trash from the utility truck into the garbage, and it wasn't wearing gloves and sustained an injury to the finger. So it was investigated and looked at. There was really no violation of policy, but just something to be aware of that we could, proper PPE, we could keep from doing that. The second one that we've had more recently was a neck strain, and that was secondary to someone attempting to start and repair a chainsaw. We had a chainsaw down at 1-1 that was being kind of a pain to start, and so they, after doing some repair on it, they pulled it for quite a while. Member went home the next day and could barely move his neck, and so there's been some days off of work because of that, and we're still kind of monitoring that. But really no violation of policy. One thing to say though with that is, if you guys fill out accident reports, which you should for any type of accident that you have, make sure that you guys are filling out the accident reports within a timely manner. Policy dictates that you have to notify someone within 48 hours of the actual injury. It doesn't really dictate when you're supposed to fill out the accident report, but a good rule of thumb is try and do it within 48 hours too, for several reasons. One, it allows us to take action as far as the admin in the department, and two, it can get an investigation going so that we can start looking into not who's at fault, but how we can prevent it next time. So we had 2 vehicle accident reports. The first one was damage to a station door while backing apparatus without the use of a backer. I think we've talked about that before. I'm not going to beat a dead horse with that. This next quarterly meeting, that person is actually going to be giving a policy review of that, and is also going to be talking about that situation as part of his remedial training, if you will. So that's upcoming. The second one that we had was damage to an engine secondary to limited access while approaching for a structure fire. This occurred during a structure fire where the driver was directed by another person to make entrance into a driveway that had a bunch of landscaping wrong. It was kind of one of those, there was no violation of policy. The member was doing what the person in charge was doing it, but even then it was kind of one of those, it was just kind of a bad luck thing. There was really no way around it. If they hadn't have committed to the driveway, they would have been humping hose an incredibly long way, which in turn would have held off firefighting activities for quite some time while they're setting up hose lines. So it's kind of one of those cost of doing business to some degree. So I spoke to the officer of that shift, and he said actually it was very well executed. They actually were surprised how well they put that engine in there. There was a little bit of damage to the bottom of it, and that's being logged for information at this time. So that was the other one. Near misses that we had this last month, we had crazing of an SCBA mask at North Bend. One of the recruits was going through a live structure fire. One of the mentors or mentees that was there basically was looked at the SCBA mask and saw the crazing, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but crazing is like tiny microscopic cracks. It's a prelude to failure of that mask. So they looked at it, they saw it, they took it out of service. Would it have failed on them? You don't know, but the problem is that mask is out of service. It's no longer can be used. So if we go into a hot fire, you could have catastrophic failure. So very good catch on the mentor's part that he was able to catch that. So we are going to log that as a near miss because nobody was injured. The second one that we had was actually on my shift. We had the fatality on I-5 at mile post. I think it was about 93, where we had just passed the 216th overpass northbound on I-5. They had a fatality accident who's talking? Oh, we can move there. Anyway, the fatality accident on the side of I-5, while the State Patrol, we were remaining on scene because State Patrol wanted us to cut the person out of the car when they got done with the accident. As we were sitting there, the engine was back behind the accident scene approximately 60 feet. We had cones out, we had flares out. It was about 12 o'clock at night. We're sitting there. One of our volunteers was behind the engine, kind of watching traffic zip still by us at 60, 70 miles an hour. And one of the career guys went back and said, hey, you need to move up forward. Don't stay back behind the engine. Literally 5 minutes later, we heard just a horrendous sound. We looked down, and here comes a semi. It was a guy that had dropped his cell phone on the passenger side of the semi, and he reached across while driving, reached across to grab the cell phone. He veered over, hit the median, and then came over and at 70 miles an hour went into the timber about 5 feet behind the engine, right where that volunteer was standing. So it was pretty crazy. We went over there. The guy was fine. The semi-truck driver was fine, but it was a pretty darn good near miss. So just another example that we need to be, when you're on that I-5, never turn your backs. Always consider the safety of everybody else, as well as the drivers that just flat out aren't paying attention. So State Patrol was there. It scared a couple of them. They said it was a pretty cool crash. They haven't seen one like that for a while, but luckily no one was injured. If you guys have seen or heard or you know of any other near misses, let me know. At the chat session, if you guys have something, we can talk about it, but email me. I like to know about those. We use them as a training thing, and also talk about it here with the safety meetings. Okay, policy review, what everybody looks forward to. So this month's policy review is 1.3019, and it's emergency incident rehabilitation. We chose to do this, or I chose to do this because of I like to look at trends with West Thurston in previous years. What are we looking at this time of year? What's upcoming? What can we do better at? The thing there under the incident or emergency incident rehabilitation, welcome to summer. We're experiencing hot temperatures. We're experiencing long time hot temperatures, and it looks like it's going to get even worse. This next week, it looks like it's supposed to go potentially close to the 90s. So increase in wildfire behavior, higher call volumes. We mix that with a little bit of dehydration, a shot of adrenaline, and low sleep numbers, and we're asking for it. I talked about the trends that we looked at. Last year we saw an overabundance of heat-related injuries in 2016. Majority of those heat-related injuries could have been prevented by both the considerations of the PPE that was being worn, i.e. someone was out on a wildfire for an extended period of time wearing bunker gear, or two, simple hydration. I've got some statistics at the end of this that I found that are pretty amazing. But a lot of it too is just kind of keeping track of the guy next to you, seeing how he's doing, and then setting up rehab. So we're going to talk about rehab, responsibilities of both administration, the responsibilities of both the officers on scene, as well as the firefighters, the people that are sitting next to you. Physical conditioning also has a lot to do with it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So the purpose, this is kind of the nuts and bolts of it. It's the policy of West Thurston to establish rehab to ensure physical and mental condition of members operating at the scene of emergency to not deteriorate to a point which affects the safety of each member or the integrity of the operation. If you look at the policy online, it's a lot longer than this. I took out kind of the essential points of each one of these policies. So the IC shall consider establishing rehab of personnel on incidents lasting 1 hour or more, or where extreme conditions exist. If you look into NFPA 1584, they say anything over 90 degrees is considered an extreme condition. Okay, that's ambient temperature. That doesn't necessarily mean the temperature outside. It means if we have a wildfire blowing heat towards us, that's an extreme condition. So that's a consideration to take into. Responsibilities. The incident commander make provisions early, consider food along with fluid replenishment, as well as medical evaluation, treatment and monitoring, as well as relief from extreme climatic environmental conditions. They have those seats that we have the ice that you can put on your arms. We have the tents that we can set up even if you get into the back of an air-conditioned vehicle. Helps tremendously.
Also have the fan. We
also have the big fans, Bob's reminded me. So we have ways of getting people out of the current condition that they're in and to mediate with that. 3.2, supervisor. So maintain awareness of condition of each member operating under their span of control. this kind of goes downhill too as well. We'll talk about that later on. And personnel, take steps for adequate hydration and remain aware of health and safety of other members. I want to point out that take steps for adequate hydration, that doesn't necessarily mean while we're on the fire scene. It means while we're here. You guys can't see him, but Lance is standing back here, and he just held up his water bottle, and that's exactly what we're talking about. If you go into a fire scene, you're not adequately hydrated, you're already behind the game ball. So it's hot out there. We're in an air-conditioned building. I've been in air-conditioned buildings most of the day, and I've sweated more than I know I have when it's wintertime. So you're losing fluid loss no matter what you're doing. The guidelines for this policy, 4.1. This is where we really kind of want to focus on this, because I think to some degree our rehab team is amazing. Support Unit 1A, the guys that run that do an incredible job of getting out there, providing people with water. But it also should be considered, and our run cards have really done a good job as far as if it's a full-blown incident, get the support unit. It's in the run card, so we're going to start Support Unit 1A immediately. But 4.1 should be considered by staff officers during the initial phase of emergency response. We go to a brush fire and we hear that it's threatening, or we hear that it's several acres in size. Rochester High School is a primary example. En route, you should consider, let's get a support unit because we know this is going to be an extended period. Remember, in the first part of this policy, it talks about anything past an hour, we need to have rehab set up for these guys. So 4.2, we have critical factors in prevention of heat injury is the maintenance of water and electrolytes. Members should consume 1 quart of water per hour during emergency operations in extreme conditions. Either so the extreme conditions, or this is when you should go to rehab, and this is also following the WAC, and this is also following NFPA 1584, which talks about rehab. Either 2 30-minute bottles or 40 minutes of strenuous work without an SCBA, the member should go to rehab or be evaluated at that time. So if you think about some of these operational periods that we're having on these wildfires, I think sometimes we go longer than that. I know I'm guilty of it. We'll start doing it, and people are like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, because you're out there with a wildland. And at that point, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave the fire line. It says, or be evaluated. So have someone come out, take a look at you. It's very easy to go downhill, and you're not even aware of it. 4.3, go. Did you have a question, Bob?
Okay.
4.3, food should be considered and provided at the scene for an extended incident when units are engaged for more than 3 hours. Water does a pretty darn good job. Electrolytes does a pretty darn good job, but we need the fuel to keep going. So anything over 3 hours, that's where the support unit comes in handy. They got all kinds of stuff on there. So
we've got a new freezer on there, so you got.
That's right.
The water's going to be cold.
Yep. Yeah. The support unit, for those that don't know, they just installed a freezer on there, so they have access to very cold water as well as some other things. And then 4.4, medical evaluation should be recorded on forms with members' name and complaints, signed, dated, and timed by the rehab officer or medical staff. If you start having a member or someone on your span of control that's saying, I'm feeling winded, I'm feeling exhausted, I think I'm dehydrated, the forms need to come out, and you at least need to get a piece of paper out. What's a really good form that we can use on our rigs that we already have is the paper forms that we used to use, the MIRs. Yeah, bust those things out. Write the person's name down, write times down, has everything on there that you need for an MIR without having to pull a Medic 1 number, but we have it recorded within our department, okay? So if this goes further than he gets a drink of water and he's fine, then we already have the preset, here's his conditions, here's his vitals, and we go from there. So those work very well for that.
We used to have a big sheet.
Yep.
That we used to use. I have no idea where the heck those sheets are. It was, you took vitals when they first come in, make sure the vitals come down before they're headed back out again. Everything is documented, name and all.
Yep.
But I don't know where to get them sheets.
Well, we'll look into that. So the sheets, we should have the sheets on there. The other thing too is if you have someone with a confirmed injury, a lot of times these rigs should have our engine accident reports in the cabs. So get those things out and start work on those. Write down what they're telling you. You can, on the notes in the back, there's all kinds of stuff. Mark the heck out of them. But we need to be able to determine at that point when we have someone that has an injury or they're exhausted or anything, we also, along with the 4.4, what are we doing? Are they going to go to the hospital? Usually if we get there and someone's complaining of severe heat exhaustion, usually the EMS staff that's on scene or the medics, they're going to make that determination. But if they're sent, that needs to be recorded, very much so. References down at the bottom. This is a lot of what we pulled with, 1584, 296, 305. I'm not going to keep reading all that, but there's a lot of good information with the occupational exposure to heat and cold stress. On the next couple slides, we talk a little bit about the signs and symptoms of that. I'm not going to go super in depth to that because that could be a 40-hour class all in itself. We have also gone over that in our EMT class before, but we're going to talk a little bit about signs and symptoms, what we're looking for, and this is for the guy next to you. And you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. Causes, effects, signs, and symptoms. We have what causes these. So work area temps and conditions, obviously. We work in an environment that is never nice. We're not as lucky as Tumwater firefighters and can wear shorts. Sorry, guys. Not sorry. So we have these inclement temperatures where it's going to zap us. Physical condition of member of employee. I can't stress enough how important it is, and I know everybody just loves getting on treadmills, but cardio, if you can work on your cardio, not always necessarily strength training, but cardio, especially this time of year, all of our firefighting activities is all based on cardio. We had a brush fire this last week that I went out on, and I ain't going to lie. I mean, I was surprised how quickly I got winded. So fluid intake, water, electrolytes. Fluid does not mean caffeine or soda. As good as it tastes, it doesn't mean that. Choosing the correct PPE. I referred to that earlier on in the meeting where we had a member last year that had an accident report, injury report, and we're not trying to, I don't say names or anything like that. I'm not trying to point out downfalls. It's all in learning and learning how we can do this better. But the person was wearing bunker gear for an extended period on a brush fire. And, my gosh, it's hard enough in a structure fire. And that guy's walking through brush in a bunker coat and an unzipped bunker coat and bunker pants. That's going to just kill you. So know when to say something. Things that keep us from saying something. Hey, I'm feeling rough. Hey, I'm feeling winded. I need some water. Some of the examples is arrogance, complacency, pride, or embarrassment. And all those, there's absolutely no place on the fire ground. I know that especially when you get a real good brush fire just ripping across the field, the last thing you want to do is you want to admit that you're starting to feel rough. But we need to come into the realization that the first part of this policy we talked about, it's going to start potentially impeding the operation. So get out of that mindset. And then also lastly, recognition of signs and symptoms. That is also for you. That is also for the person next to you. They did a study several years ago, and they found out that most people, they compared early signs of dehydration and heat-related illnesses to DUI drivers. That majority of times they're like, oh, you see the cop episodes where the cop's like, going to a field sobriety. He's like, oh yeah, no problem, and he's out there touching your nose, and he's they really don't know a lot of times. They have no clue that they're impaired. Same thing with heat-related illnesses is a lot of times you have no idea that your level of dehydration has taken you to a point where your cognitive skills as well as your working ability is being affected and you have no idea. So who's that? So who's the person that's going to see you the best? It's probably going to be the guy next to you. So keep an idea, if Mike and I are working next to each other and I start seeing him stumble a little bit more and pant a lot more, then we need to say something about it. The signs and symptoms of heat stroke, we talk about some of the minor beginnings of it. We touched on it briefly. Extreme sweating, feeling faint, developing headaches. Those are some of that maybe you need to get some water. Moderate, we talk about stumbling, speech, and cognitive problems. That can also go in tune with lack of sleep as well. That really affects that as well from the studies that I kind of looked at. And then we talk about major, lack of sweating. You're out 90-degree temperatures and you look over and someone's like cool and they're dry skin, not good, okay? Usually at that point you're going to have other signs where this is bad. But if you pull someone, if you're on an EMS staff or you're asked to evaluate someone and it's been 90 degrees out and they've been out working and you go and you touch their skin and they're dry and cool, that's not good, okay? It means that their body has no longer, evaporation has failed, conduction has failed, all that's failed, and it's now reverting to basically just shunting stuff to the core, which isn't good. Also, the ultra level of consciousness, they're going to get to that level at that point. Results, we're talking about obviously injuries, poor decision making, unsafe scenes, and investigations, and it keeps going on from there. So we want to keep from doing that. So here's some. I want to touch on some of the things that I looked at when I was researching this. They did a performance study by NASA. Now, granted, they used a telegraph key operator. So these are guys that are not out doing extremely physical work. Okay, but what they did is they put them in an environment where they were able to raise the temperatures, and they had keystrokes that these telegraph keys guys were doing, and it was amazing to see how much stuff they did. What I didn't note in here is after they took them up to 80, 90 degrees, then they brought them back down, and a lot of the stuff that they were doing, the mistakes that they were doing, went back down to normal range. So it wasn't just, oh, it's because it got hot, they were used to it. No, it was temperature related. So temperatures at 80 degrees, operator will make 5 errors an hour and 19 mistakes after 3 hours. 90 degrees, the operator made 9 mistakes per hour, 27 after 3 hours. 95 degrees, mistakes went up to 60 in 1 hour and 138 in 3 hours. Again, although errors were made by telegraph key operators, and it's not a critical, loss of life or injury, the same hot environment will produce proportional amount of errors regardless of the task or occupation is what I should have put in there. So if you think about that, when it comes to the fire ground and also looking after, especially if we're looking after anybody else, kind of concerning. Bruce Baker was one of the guys that did this, that helped doing this study, and he's not a doctor, but he studies heat-related illnesses, and so he had a quote that they were talking about, and it's true fact when I looked it up, and so I put it in red there, and it says when ambient temperature of the surrounding air is 95 degrees or higher, radiation, convection, and conduction stop working. Okay, so all the ways that we kind of blow off some heat, or even if we gather heat, that it doesn't work anymore. It's null. So the only thing we have is evaporation. Okay, which you think about that, it sounds kind of elementary, but when you think about that, if you're wearing PPE that doesn't allow you to have evaporation, now all you're going to do is continue to get hotter and hotter, i.e. the guy that was wearing bunker gear or the guy that's wearing full wildland gear that's been out there for several hours and he hasn't had an ability to take that off for a minute and cool off. Okay, so something to keep in mind. So that's pretty much it for the safety portion of this. I have at the bottom there, big thanks to Jessica for putting this together. There is no way in heck I would have figured any of this stuff out. We're going to continue to try and do this a little bit more as far as with the screens and being able to have people log in. A couple different announcements too. One, the new SDSs are out. So Justin Degani did a really good job of putting new SDSs together. They're at every station. They're in a big blue binder. They're marked well. Take a minute, not look at them. You don't have to, but take a look and at least know where you guys are at, where they're at, because there may be a time when an auditor comes through and he can pull anybody and come up and say, where's the SDS is at? You guys are expected to be able to say this is right where it's at and take them to it. So, you have anything?
Did you want to see if anybody has any questions?
Yes. So if anybody has any questions, if you guys want to type them in, you can, or the people that have the online stuff, they can, or the interactive, they can ask stuff too. So we'll take a few minutes. For those that don't have any questions, thank you for tuning in. This will also go, after this is recorded, this is being recorded right now, this is then going to be put on the training site. So coworkers, any other volunteers that don't have, that weren't able to watch this, tell them it will be on the training site and they can watch it there and they can log that information as well. So
What's an SDS?
MSDSs, they now call them SDSs.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're going global. So they're calling them SDSs now.
That's how they control something on the spill then, right?
Okay, so it looks like nobody has any questions. So thank you very much, and we will see you guys later. Everybody. Oh, Jessica has something. Hang on real quick.
Hi, so I wanted to make an announcement. We're going to stop sharing this PowerPoint. We have the fitness app now actually on our website, so I'm going to show you really fast. So everybody has access to this now. If you just go to the West Thurston website and go to the members login, in the menu bar, it's going to be fitness tracking, and you can just add a workout. You can track your own workouts. You can view a workout summary. If you want to just fiddle around with it, the internet's not anything super awesome right now, but your login will be your email, your West Thurston email. And then your password is to be determined. And add your workouts that are on shift or when you're on your own time. This allows us to track whether or not, the Hearts and Backs program is actually working. And that's it for the fitness app. But I